He didn't yell. That's what stayed with me. He just stood by the sink, wiping his hands on that striped kitchen towel, and said it like he was commenting on the weather. I think it was the way he avoided my eyes that made it worse. Rinsing dishes that were already clean. Then he said it, the words I still feel more than remember. "You're not really needed anymore, Mom. I'm Ruth Morrow, 69 years old." And that was the moment I knew I was done pretending this was still my home. Subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. I stood there, not angry, not even hurt at first, just hollow. As if my insides had slipped. Out when I wasn't looking. The room was warm, but I felt cold down the center of my back. I remember hearing the faint clink of the fork he dropped into the sink. I reached for my tea, found it had gone cold, and set it back down. That was it. No tears, no shouting, just a long silence that pressed against my chest like a door slowly closing. Later that night, I packed a single bag. Before that house became mine only on paper, it was full of breath. Toddler feet, burnt toast, music from a radio I never learned. To program properly, I raised Eric there. I taught him to walk on that crooked hallway rug. I used to leave notes in his lunchbox with little smiley faces. He kept them folded in a shoebox under his bed. At least he used to. His father died young, heart failure. I had just turned 41. I remember staring at the bedroom wall that night, tracing the pattern in the wallpaper with my eyes while my body refused to sleep. Eric was 14 then and too quiet. He didn't cry, stayed in his room for most of that week. When he came out, he looked taller, colder, like some part of him had decided it was safer not to feel too much. We got through it together, or I thought. We did. I worked nights at the hospital. I'd get home just before sunrise, take off my shoes by the back door, and peek in on him before he left for school. I always left something for him on the table. French toast, reheated potatoes, sometimes just a banana and a Post-it saying, "Be kind today." He never said much about those, but he always ate them. I never remarried. There were a few kind men, a few close calls, but I had my son. And when you're a mother with one child and a full-time job and no softness to fall back into at night, you learn to tuck your love in small places, corners of cupboards, pockets of laundry. The sound of his shoes kicking off in the hallway, that was enough. He went to college on scholarships. I paid for everything else. Took out a second mortgage without telling him. Told him it was covered. I remember the day he graduated, how his eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on me. Smiled like the world was finally safe again. That was one of the best moments of my life. When he got married, I gave him the house. Legally, I still owned it, but I let them move in. Said it was only fair to start their life without debt. I stayed in the guest room after my knee surgery. Said it would just be for a few weeks. But weeks turned to months, and no one asked me to leave. No one invited me to stay either. The house changed after that. Softer lights, new curtains. Shelves full of things I didn't buy. There were baby pictures of my granddaughter everywhere, but none of me. I kept telling myself it didn't matter. That they were just busy, tired, focused on the future. But I noticed the way my daughter-in-law would pause before entering a room I was in, like she had to steel herself. Like my presence required patience. Eric stopped calling me Mom. He just said Ma, short, clipped, like something you say out of duty, not love. Still, I cooked. I folded laundry when no one asked me to. I made sure the garden didn't dry out. I clipped coupons they never used. I stayed out of the way when they had guests. I went to my room early. I wore slippers to keep the floors quiet. I convinced myself I was helping. The truth is, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe my son, the boy who held my hand when he was scared of thunder. The man who once sent me flowers on his first paycheck could let me fade so gently. But that's how it happens. Not in explosions, but in erosion. I don't remember when I stopped sitting at the dinner table. Maybe it was after the third time they didn't set a place. I told myself I preferred the quiet anyway, that I liked eating in my room with the evening news humming in the background, that it didn't hurt. But it did. It wasn't one moment. It was a slow dissolve. It's a series of small things that didn't matter until they did. When Eric said I wasn't needed anymore, it wasn't cruel. That's what struck me. It was practical, like announcing the weather. He said it the way you'd say the milk is expired, or the car needs a wash, as if I was something that had run its course. I slept that night with my eyes open, not metaphorically. I stared at the ceiling for hours. My body was still, but my mind was wide awake. I kept going over it. Not just what he said, but everything that led up to it. The quiet rooms, the half-closed doors, the silence that had grown around me like ivy, and still a part of me hoped it was a mistake. That he'd knock on my door and say he didn't mean it. That he'd laugh, make a joke, bring me tea like he used to when he was a boy. That I'd wake up and hear him humming in the kitchen, but the morning came. And so did the silence. That was the day I began writing things down. Passwords, account numbers, copies of the deed, notes to myself. I folded them neatly into a manila envelope I labeled with my name. Just my name. Not Mom, not Ma. Just Ruth Morrow. There's something powerful about writing your own name after years of being referred to as someone's mother, someone's burden. It was the first time I felt like I belonged to myself again. It started with the mail, a thin envelope addressed to me, but opened already, sloppily resealed. I didn't say anything, just slid it into my room and sat on the edge of the bed with the door shut. It was a notice from the bank confirmation that a home equity line had been initiated. In my name, I hadn't signed anything. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, that someone had made an error in paperwork, or perhaps it was an old document. Surfacing again, I read it twice. Then again, the amount was large. Much larger than what anyone had ever talked to me about. I didn't go into the kitchen that evening. I didn't ask Eric or his wife anything. I just sat on the bed holding the letter in my lap. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I expected to feel angry or violated. Instead, I felt small. Like a dim bulb in a room full of strangers. Then the next morning, I called the number on the notice while they were out. The woman on the phone confirmed everything. My name, my birthday, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The line had been approved weeks ago. The funds had already been used. That was the moment I understood it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't even a secret. Not really. Just something they assumed I wouldn't notice or care about. Or maybe they thought I wouldn't do anything even if I found out. That hurt more than the forgery. The quiet confidence that I was harmless. That I was done. I remembered a conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear. Eric had been talking to someone on the phone. I think it was his wife, maybe her father. He thought I was asleep. He said she won't use the money. She barely checks her accounts. It's not like she needs it now. I froze in the hallway, feet cold against the tiles. He didn't sound cruel. He sounded ... resolved, like it made sense. Like I'd been filed under no longer relevant. That night, I looked through a drawer I hadn't opened in years. I kept all my documents there. The original deed, my marriage certificate, life insurance, old tax forms, things that once made me feel secure. I laid them all out on the bed, not in panic. Not to prepare a fight. I needed to see them, to remind myself that I still existed in ink. The next day, I went to the bank. The woman at the desk asked if I was sure I hadn't signed the documents. Her tone wasn't accusatory, just tired. Like she'd seen too many stories like mine. Nodded. She scanned the forms into her computer, showed me the signature on the screen. It was shaky. It's almost like someone had tried to mimic my hand, but forgot the details. The M in Morrow was too smooth. The loop I always added in the R was missing. I asked for a printed copy. She gave it to me. I folded it once and put it in my purse. No one knew I went. No one asked why I was gone most of the afternoon. That week, I started noticing other things. Small transactions on my joint account. Charges for electronics I hadn't bought. Payments to vendors I didn't recognize. I stopped feeling sad. I started taking notes. I made a list. Not of the money, of the moments. The glances that looked through me. The empty chairs at birthdays. The way Eric's wife would move my clothes out of the dryer before they were done, leave them wrinkled on a chair. The way no one asked how my leg was healing anymore. The last time my granddaughter hugged me without being told to, it became clear to me that I was not family. I was a resource. A fading one. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. Not yet. I wanted to hold the knowledge quietly, like a bird in my hands. It's fragile but alive. There's something powerful about knowing the truth and choosing when to release it. A week later, I found a document tucked into the kitchen drawer behind the takeout menus. A contract, not finalized, but close. It was a plan to renovate the house, add a guest wing, modernize the kitchen. The budget was high, the financing section was left blank. But I recognized the handwriting next to the notes. Eric's dot in the margin, it said. Once Mom is officially out, that was when I knew it wasn't just forgetfulness, or stress, or generational distance. It was a plan. To quiet push toward the edge until I fell off without anyone needing to say the words. The "you're not needed anymore" wasn't a slip. It was the final step in a strategy I hadn't even realized I was part of. I sat on the porch that night and watched the porch light flicker. Eric had meant to fix it months ago. It still buzzed and dimmed every few seconds. I used to find comfort in that light. Now it felt like a warning, I thought. About my husband. About how he used to fix everything the same day it broke. How he left so early. How Eric had to become someone too fast. I wanted to blame grief. I wanted to believe this was some twisted legacy of loss, but I couldn't. This wasn't about death. It was about erasure. And I had been erased slowly. With polite words, with silence, with documents. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence on the first page. They forgot I still had a key. I woke up before the sun, not because I had anywhere to be, but because I couldn't lie there anymore. There's a kind of stillness that becomes unbearable once the truth settles inside you. I made tea, though I didn't drink it. I just needed the warmth in my hands, the illusion of a routine. The house was quiet. Eric and his wife were still, asleep. My granddaughter's toys were scattered near the fireplace. A plastic doll's arm twisted the wrong way. The same doll I bought her on her birthday last year. She never knew that. They told her it was from her aunt. I didn't feel angry. I felt awake. It's like something had clicked back into place in me. Something I hadn't felt since my husband died, maybe even longer. A quiet voice inside me had started whispering again. You can leave. It didn't say run, didn't scream. It wasn't about revenge. It was about gravity. I had been orbiting other people's wants for so long that I forgot what it felt like to move on my own terms. That day, I went to the storage unit I'd kept in town. Paid up every year, even when I didn't need it. I opened it and stood there, breathing in the dust. Old boxes, framed photos. A blanket my mother crocheted when I was a girl. My husband's favorite coat, still smelling faintly of cedar. It was the only place that felt like it belonged to me. I sat down on a crate and cried for the first time. Not because I was sad. Not exactly. I cried because I realized how much I had given, how much I had swallowed. How much of me had been edited out of the life I built with both hands. And no one even noticed. They had built a world where I wasn't needed. So I stopped trying to be. That night I began writing lists, not of what to pack. I didn't need much. But of what to leave behind. Things they assumed were theirs. The guest towels. The silver my mother gave me. The old piano in the basement. The deed tucked quietly into the folder marked records. I listed everything down to the drawer knobs I'd replaced myself when Eric was 8 and always slamming things. They wouldn't notice the details, but I did. And the details were mine. I also started calling places a lawyer, a notary, a hotel, off the highway. The woman at the front desk said they had monthly rates, said it was quiet and clean. That was enough. I reserved a room without asking for photos. I didn't need it to be beautiful. I just needed it to be mine. I moved my documents into a manila envelope and wrote a new name on the front. Ruth Morrow, owner, just like that. Not a mother, not a burden. Not a line item on someone else's mortgage. That weekend, Eric and his wife were out for some event, a gala, I think. They didn't ask if I wanted to go. I wouldn't have gone, but it mattered that they didn't ask. The little erasures still had their sting. While they were gone, I packed. 1 suitcase, 1 tote bag, 1 envelope. I left the house before they returned. I didn't leave a note. I didn't explain. I left the keys on the table, not because I was giving up the house, because I no longer needed to stay in it to own it. They had mistaken my presence for dependence. That was their mistake. Ownership isn't always about staying at the hotel. I unpacked slowly, hung up my 1 coat, folded my socks neatly in the drawer, laid the manila envelope in the bedside table like it was scripture. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't restless. I felt still, the way a lake feels before dawn. The next day, I went to the courthouse, filed a fraud report. The woman at the desk was kind. She didn't ask for details, just nodded, took my statement, made copies. I handed over everything, the fake signature, the dates, the misuse of my accounts, quietly, calmly, no drama. Just truth. I also made a legal declaration that no renovations were permitted on the property without my approval. I canceled the pending construction loan, froze the equity line, transferred the house into a protected trust with my name as sole trustee. Every step felt like breathing again. They had no idea. That night, back in the hotel room, I sat by the window and watched the parking lot. It was raining gently, drops forming little rivers on the glass. I thought about the house, the walls. I painted, the garden I built, the memories pressed into every floorboard. I didn't want to burn it down. I just wanted it to remember who made it a home, for the first time in years. I called an old friend, Beth. We used to walk together before my knee gave me trouble. She laughed when she heard my voice, said she had been thinking of me, said she still made that apple crumble I used to love. I didn't tell her everything, just that I was staying somewhere new for a while, that I was okay. She offered to pick me up for lunch the next day. I said yes. It was the first yes I'd said in months. That wasn't out of obligation. In the quiet of that room, took one last step. I closed my eyes and said the words I've been afraid to admit even to myself. I'm not lost. I've just stopped being found by the wrong people. The next morning, I left a single envelope at the front desk of the hotel. It was addressed to my son with no return name, just the words, "Property files enclosed, do not discard." I asked the receptionist to mail it the next day. I didn't want it to reach him too soon. I wanted time to move a few more pieces into place. There was no letter inside, just photocopies of everything I'd done. Legal freeze on the equity. Proof of fraud report. Ownership transfer into a trust he couldn't touch. The original deed stamped. All of it quiet. All of it final. I spent that day walking through a small bookstore not far from the hotel, the kind of place that smells like old pages and floor wax. I didn't buy anything, touch the spines. Let myself be anonymous again. It's unseen in the best way. I was beginning to understand the difference between being invisible and being free. That night, I opened my notebook again. I made a list of what I had now. 1 room, 1 key, 1 name, 1 body that still belonged to me, and silence, not as absence, but as power. The kind that fills the room when you no longer need to explain yourself. The following afternoon, I went back to the bank, met with a different manager this time. Someone who looked surprised to see a woman my age carrying a folder thicker than most legal binders. He offered me coffee. I declined. I handed him my documents, asked for my name to be removed from the joint account, asked for my own account to be created under a new mailing address, told him calmly I didn't want to be reachable at the old house. He nodded slowly, said of course, like he had just remembered I was still the one in charge. On my way out, I stopped by a print shop and had a dozen do not forward address change cards made up. I sent them to every place I could think of: Medicare, the pharmacy, the library, the pension office. One to the local parish, though I hadn't been in years. Still, it felt symbolic. A quiet reclaiming of presence. That weekend, I returned to the storage unit. I took my time there, picked through what I wanted to carry forward. Some old sweaters, a photo of me and my husband at a summer fair, my wedding band, scarf my son made in 2nd grade. I kept it. Not for him, but for the memory of the boy who once made it. I left behind a box of Eric's baby clothes. Labeled it clearly, not mine anymore. That felt like a ritual. Like letting go without bitterness. Like burying something gently. I slept better that night. It was the kind of sleep you get when no one expects anything from you. In the morning, the woman at the front desk of the hotel, her name was Mina, started chatting with me more. She said she had a mother about my age, asked if I wanted fresh towels, asked how I liked my tea. Her kindness wasn't loud, just there. It's like a small lamp left on in the hallway. One evening, she knocked on my door with a slice of cake wrapped in plastic. Said she'd made too much. I knew that was a lie, but I accepted it anyway. We sat in the lobby and ate quietly. No questions? Just cake and soft light and the sound of the ice machine humming down the hall. I began to realize I didn't miss the house. I missed the idea of being wanted inside it. There's a difference. And once you name that difference, stop grieving. What never really included you? On the 3rd day after I'd mailed the envelope, I turned off my phone. I knew what would come: the voicemails, the texts, the flurry of realization. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to be pulled back into their confusion. Instead, I walked to a nearby diner and ordered breakfast for dinner. The waitress called me Hun. She refilled my coffee before I asked. I tipped her more than I should have. It felt good to give something without strings. Back at the hotel, I ran a hot bath in the narrow little tub. The faucet dripped slightly, and the tiles were old. But it felt more honest than the marble bathroom I'd left behind. I closed my eyes and leaned back, and I imagined the moment my son would walk in and find the envelope. I imagined him flipping through the pages. The look on his face, not angry, but lost. Realizing what had slipped through his fingers, and I knew I wouldn't go back. Not because I hated him, but because I had found something better than forgiveness. I had found my own voice again. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It just needed to belong to me. I turned the phone back on 3 days later. Not out of curiosity, not because I missed anyone, just because I was ready. The silence had done its work. I was steady now, even if what waited on the other side tried to pull me back into the storm. 20-6. Missed calls. 11 voicemails. 3 messages from numbers I didn't recognize. I played the first one. Eric's voice tight, barely holding. The panic. Hey, mom. I think something weird's going on with the house paperwork. Did you move something? Can you call me back? I didn't. I played the next one. His wife this time, voice sharp around the edges, trying to sound calm and failing. Hi, Ruth. We need to talk. Some documents came in the mail, and there seems to be a misunderstanding. Can you please come home so we can sort this out? Home. She still called it that. Each message after that got shorter, more rushed. By the 5th one, Eric's voice cracked a little. Mom, I really need you to call me. The bank called. They froze the loan. We don't know what's going on. I saved them all, not out of spite, just to remember the sound of them needing me, wanting me. Realizing I wasn't just some soft background figure. that I was the ground they stood on. I didn't return any calls. Not yet. I sat in the motel chair by the window, watching the light move across the parking lot. It was a dull afternoon, gray and washed out, but I liked it. The kind of sky that doesn't demand anything from you. They kept calling. Some messages came at odd hours, midnight, 4 a.m. One said simply, "Mom, please, we need to talk. Please." And then came the text, Eric's wife. Not angry, not polite either. "We're about to lose the contractor. They said without your signature, the permits are invalid. Need to talk." This is serious. That word need came up again and again. They needed my approval. They needed my name. They needed what they thought was quietly theirs. But they hadn't needed me when I was folding their towels or taking their daughter to school. They hadn't needed me when I sat in silence while they planned things around me, through me, over me. Need is a strange thing. It can sound like love if you're not listening closely enough. But I was listening now. One morning, I checked the house listing. Not online. I still had access to some of the shared files. Renovation plans had quietly been part of a refinancing application. The house was supposed to be appraised again, but the assessor had flagged a legal discrepancy. The trust froze everything. They couldn't borrow against what they didn't own. Not anymore. And that was when I saw it. A draft listing. It's prepared but not published. They had been planning to sell it, move closer to her family, start fresh, without telling me. They would have cashed out, used the equity I gave them, and left me in the guest room without explanation. Maybe they would have given me a few months to adjust. Maybe not. But now they were stuck. They couldn't refinance, couldn't renovate, couldn't sell, couldn't even pretend anymore. The last voicemail came a few days later. It was Eric. No anger this time. It's just something softer. Or maybe just more tired. "Hey, I know you're probably upset. I didn't mean to say that about not needing you. I wasn't thinking. We just thought, we assumed. I don't know. Can you just call me?" I listened twice. Not because I needed to hear it, but because it was the first time he admitted to assuming. That was the real betrayal. Not the signature, not the loan, but the quiet belief that I wouldn't matter, that I'd stay quiet. I didn't know how to disappear the right way. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been written, in contracts, in silence. In a single manila envelope that had shattered their plans, Mina noticed. I looked calmer, said my face had softened. She offered me a slice of peach pie from her aunt's bakery. I said yes. We ate it on the steps behind the motel, birds pecking at crumbs a few feet away. She told me she'd once lived with her brother's family and left in the middle of the night. Said she never looked back. We didn't talk much more after that, but the quiet between us felt like recognition. I started walking a little each morning down the block, round the gas station, into a thrift store where I bought a teacup just because it reminded me of the one I used to sip from before my husband left for work. I didn't bring it back to the motel. I left it on a bench in the sun, just to see if someone else might pick it up and smile. I wasn't thinking about Eric much anymore. The pain had faded from a burn to something like scar tissue. There, but no longer tender. I think that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, just being able to breathe without flinching. I stopped checking the phone after that. The battery eventually drained, and I didn't rush to find the charger. Days folded quietly into one another, and I let them. It felt like the first time in a long while I wasn't holding myself up for anyone else's comfort. I didn't have a plan. Not in the way I used to. But every morning I woke up in that little room with the thin blue curtains. I made a small promise to myself. Breathe, stretch, wash my face slowly. Make tea. Sit in silence without filling it. The motel had become something soft. Not permanent, but not temporary either. Just mine for now. No one knocking on my door. No footsteps outside my room that I had to brace myself for. Just the low hum of the vending machine in the hallway. And the distant sound of tires on the highway. Some nights I'd hear a child laughing from one of the rooms across the lot. It used to make me ache, but now I just let it pass through me. Like wind. Not every sound is an invitation. Some are just proof the world is still turning. I found a library not far from the motel. I walked there slowly one morning, my coat buttoned tight against the early chill. The woman behind the desk asked if I needed help setting up a card. I told her I did. She smiled and handed me a form.name. I hesitated, then wrote, Ruth Morrow, address. I wrote the motels. Even though I knew I wouldn't stay forever, she stamped the back of the card and handed it to me like it was something sacred. I held it in both hands for a moment before slipping it into my pocket. I hadn't realized how much I missed being known by name without being reduced to it. I started spending a few hours there each day, reading quietly. Sometimes writing in a small notebook I kept tucked inside my coat. Not letters, not a diary, just lines, fragments, things I didn't have to explain. There was a boy who came in every day around 3, maybe 11 or 12 years old. He always wore a red hoodie and sat at the far end of the table with a beat-up sketchbook. Never spoke to him. He never spoke to me. But we nodded every time, like something unspoken passed between us. People making a quiet place inside the world. One afternoon, I left him a new box of colored pencils and a note that said, "Keep going. Your lines matter." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. That night, I slept with the window cracked open, even though it was cold. I wanted to hear the wind move. It reminded me I was still here at the diner up the road. The waitress started to remember my order. Scrambled eggs, 1 slice of toast, black coffee. She called me darling. Not like family, but like someone who'd earned it. One day, a man about my age asked if he could sit across from me. He had kind eyes, wore a blue flannel shirt, and carried a paperback mystery novel. Said the booth behind him was too cold. I nodded. We didn't say much, but when we left, he said maybe he'd see me around. I said maybe I didn't need anything from him. That's what made it feel light. I kept the folder with the deed in the bedside drawer. I didn't check it anymore. It was enough knowing it was there, like a stone at the bottom of a river. Unmoving, secure. Some mornings I walked past houses and imagined their kitchens, their soft lights before dawn. I didn't envy them. I didn't want a new house. I just wanted to feel that closeness again, with space, with silence, with myself. I started writing down recipes, not to cook, not yet, but just to remember the rhythm of them. Half a teaspoon, simmer gently. Fold, don't stir. Words that reminded me how to take care of something without burning it. One day, Nina at the front desk said a room had opened up on the back side of the building, quieter, a small window, overlooking a patch of grass where stray cats sometimes slept. She said it was mine if I wanted it. I said yes. When I moved my things, just a suitcase, a tote, a folder, I felt something shift. Not forward, not back. Just inward. I unpacked slowly, hung a small scarf over the lamp. To warm the light, set a rock I found on the sidewalk on the Windowsill, and for the first time in a long time, I whispered something aloud, just for myself. Thank you for staying. I didn't mean it to anyone, not even to me. Maybe just to time. Or grace. Or whatever invisible thing had carried me this far. No one came to find me. No one begged me to come home. And I stopped expecting them to. Instead, I walked to the store and bought a small plant. A fern. Something that would need a little water. A little sun. And a bit of patience. I set it by the window. Didn't name it, just watched it stretch toward the light. It had been nearly a month. When the envelope came, no return address. Just my name, carefully written in that familiar, almost too neat handwriting, the way Eric always wrote when he was nervous. The paper was thick. He'd bought something expensive for this letter. That alone told me more than the words would. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the nightstand beside the fern and stared at it through the morning light. The air in the room held the weight of it, as if something old had walked in and taken a seat. I made tea, sat with it, let the quiet stretch as far as it needed to. Then, when I was ready, I opened it. It was only one page. No greeting. No dear Mom. Just a line at the top. I don't know how to apologize for what I said. The rest of the letter felt like someone fumbling in the dark, trying to explain damage without naming the weapon. He said he was under stress, that things had moved too fast with the house, that they didn't mean to leave me out, not really, that I had always been the steady one, and he thought I'd understand, that word again, that assumption, that I would absorb everything without flinching, that I would swallow the sharp edges because I'd always done it before. Near the bottom of the page, he wrote something quieter. I didn't realize how much you held up until it was gone. And then, if you ever want to come back, ... you still have a place here. I folded the letter and set it back in the envelope. Didn't cry, didn't rage. I just sat there and let the words echo around the room. I understood what he meant. I even believed he meant it. But I also knew what wasn't written. There was no mention of the forged signature. No admission about the account withdrawals. No acknowledgement of the plan to sell the house. Just regret. An invitation, but regret. Isn't repair? An invitation isn't reconciliation? I didn't need him to grovel. I didn't need a courtroom apology or grand gestures. I just needed something real. And this wasn't it. Not yet. Still, I carried the letter in my coat pocket the next day, not because I planned to respond, but because I wanted to feel the weight of his words before I let them go. That afternoon, I went to the diner. The man in the blue flannel shirt was there again. He gave a small nod, asked if I wanted company. I said yes. We sat quietly for a while, sipping coffee. He told me his name was Walter, said he used to be an electrician before his hand started trembling. Now, he helped fix small things at the senior center just to keep moving. He asked what I used to do. I said I'd been a nurse. He smiled and said that explained the calm. I laughed a little. Said it was mostly exhaustion, pretending to be grace. He said he understood, and I believed him. Before we parted, he handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was a drawing, a sketch of the diner window from where he sat. Lines soft, light pencil. A quiet kind of beautiful. He said it helped him remember things better. When he drew them, I kept the paper, slipped it in beside Eric's letter. 2 different attempts at connection, both unfinished in their own way. Back at the motel, I wrote a response. Not to send. Just to write ... Eric. I never needed a perfect son, just an honest one. I raised you to stand, but I didn't know you'd learn to stand over me. You asked me to come back, but I've already returned to myself, and I won't leave again. I've folded the note, burned it in a coffee cup in the bathroom sink, and watched the ash curl. There was no rage in the act, only release. A few days later, Mina knocked gently and said someone had left something for me at the front desk. It was a photograph ... old, printed from a phone, not a professional shot. It was my granddaughter, sitting on the porch steps of the house I built, holding a toy piano, one of the few things I kept from her father's childhood. On the back, someone had written, she asked where you were. I told her you were somewhere peaceful. That time I did. Cry ... not from sadness, but from the ache of being seen again, even for a moment. Even if it wasn't from the person who owed it. I didn't write back, but I placed the photo in a small frame and set it next to the fern. The plant was growing, stretching, wider now, a few leaves drooping gently toward the light. I whispered to it that night, not because I believed it could hear me, but because some things deserve to be spoken. Anyway, I said, I was never lost. I was just waiting to be found by myself, and in that whisper, I felt something loosen, the last thread of who I used to be. There's a stillness that comes after you stop waiting for someone to return what they took. Not peace, exactly. Not at first, but something like room. Space inside your chest where the ache used to live. You start noticing little things again. It's the way the sun lands on your hands through the window, the feel of warm socks, the sound of birds when no one's trying to talk over them. I've been here almost 2 months now. My name is still on the trust. The house remains frozen. They haven't tried again. Maybe they know better, or maybe they're tired. I don't check anymore. The phone stays off, the fern is still alive, and every morning I rise slowly, carefully, without apology. Some evenings I walk a little farther than I should. Past the laundromat, up the side street where someone's always cooking something that smells like garlic and kindness. I pass windows lit with soft lamps, curtains pulled halfway. Sometimes I pause and just listen, not out of loneliness, but because I'm reminded the world is wide and not all of it has my name written across it, and that's okay. I've started volunteering at the library, just a few hours a week, shelving books, helping people print things. The boy in the red hoodie, his name is Jonah, finally spoke to me. He said, I liked the pencils. Then he showed me a drawing he'd done, a quiet street. One light on. In one window, a small woman with a coat and a bag. He said it was me, even though it looked like a shadow. I said thank you. It was one of the most generous portraits I've ever received. Last week, Walter and I had lunch again. He brought a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and a bottle of ginger ale. We sat on a bench behind the motel, watched the wind toss around a plastic bag stuck in the fence. He said he used to think starting over was for young people. I said maybe starting over just looks different when you're older, smaller, quieter, but just as real. He nodded, told me he bought a small camper, said maybe he'd take it up north, said I was welcome to come see it if I wanted. I didn't answer, but I smiled. And sometimes that's an answer too. I think about Eric less now. Not in bitterness, just in distance. He's someone I once knew completely. Now he's someone I understand. There's grief in that, but there's grace in it too. You can forgive someone without opening the door again. You can love what you once had without letting it back into your body. I don't dream of the house anymore, but sometimes I dream of the hallway, the one with the crooked rug where Eric used to run with bare feet. I dream of small laughter echoing up the stairs. Kate. And in the dream, I never walk all the way in. I just stand at the door and listen. And then I wake up, not aching. Just aware. Aware that I was part of something once and that it changed. That I changed one day last week. I wrote myself a letter. I used to write letters to everyone else. Grocery lists for Eric. Instructions for the babysitter. Birthday cards, condolences, but never one just for me. So I sat at the little desk in my room, pulled out a plain sheet of paper and began. Dear Ruth, you were always here. Even when they forgot. Even when they overlooked you. Even when your name was only used on documents, not on lips. You remained. You grew. You stayed kind. You stayed true. I see you now. And you are enough. I folded it neatly, slipped it into an envelope, wrote my name on the front in blue ink, and tucked it inside the drawer. Next to the fern. Maybe one day I'll read it again. Maybe I won't need to. Either way, it's there. Like, I am no longer a guest in my own life. No longer waiting for a knock. I bought a small ceramic bowl at the thrift store yesterday. Pale green, smooth at the edges. I keep it by the window now. In it, I placed 3 things. A stone from the sidewalk, a pressed leaf from a tree I passed on my morning walk, and a photo of me and my husband. The one from that summer for Ritz. Not a shrine. It's a reminder of all the quiet things I've kept, all the parts of me one could take. This is not a grand ending. There's no speech. It's no confrontation. No big red ribbon tied around a lesson. There is just me. Ruth Morrow sitting in a room that smells faintly of tea and old. It's paper. Listening to the wind, knowing that I am no longer missing. And this time, I decide who gets to call me anything else. The end.